going to get started on our data-driven reflection tactic. My friend Lisa's coming in. She's had some other things she's had to work on. So we're going to get started so that we can make sure we honor your time. So during this really short time together, we want you to leave with a tactic for data-driven reflection so that we can go from having assumptions about things, this is what I think, to just that scientific method of I'm going to come up with a hypothesis, and that hypothesis will lead me to make decisions that are going to support our learners. All right. So that's what we want to do during our time today. Everybody kind of read through the learning outcome and then look at the skills that hopefully you're going to walk away with today. We want you to be able to make data-driven decisions through utilizing this tactic. I used it a few weeks back in Georgia, and it just worked beautifully. So you're going to come away with something that you can take and you can turn it around on your campus. All right, so read this and then type in the chat whether you agree with it or you disagree with it. Type in the chat, agree or disagree. Right? Yes, most of you agree. Yeah. There's times where, well, I'm using all the data. But if we just have a bunch of data and we don't have a way to utilize it, then we're really not using any at all. So thanks for all of that. Do you ever feel like this? I have data everywhere, but it's really not helping me. What? What are some things? Like, I have data everywhere, but not to help me. How would you finish that? But not to help me think, but not to help me what? What's another thing you could put in there? Oh, good, Nicole. But not to help me problem solve, right? But not to, oh, Heather, I love it. But not to help me help students. Yeah, I think we all feel like that at one point. Hi, Lisa. We all feel like that at one point or another. Oh, but not to help us inform instruction. Don't you love these, Lisa?
Yeah, they're awesome responses.
I know. I'm always like, are we going to come up with something? Lisa, I'm going to kind of turn it over to you because my voice is kind of gone. I'm going to save it for the next one. And I'll just kind of carry on with you.
All right. Let me grab. All right, let's go to the next slide.
Coming.
Okay. So what you'll see on the next slide in a moment is a quote from Dr. George Batchke, who is a professor and director emeritus at the Institute of School Reform, USF. I've actually used some of the protocols from the Institute of School Reform, so you may want to check it out. But he says every system is perfectly aligned for the results that it gets. So I want you to just think about that for a moment. And state whether you agree or disagree with that one as well in the chat. Thanks, Jessica. Thanks, Lisa, Maya, Danielle, Sarah. I'm not going to be able to get all your names. But yeah, I think that we've come to agree that this particular quote is really true across the board. I see a few people disagreeing. And so I'd be curious about that. We won't be able to have you unmute, but if you do disagree, if you could type in the chat why you disagree. But let's be thinking about that as we move forward. So on the next slide, I really want you to think about focusing on the data when you're thinking about, so we have all this data, and oftentimes we're not using all of the data, but we want to focus on the right data and think about what you think will happen, what exactly is happening, and what happened compared to what you thought would happen. So this gets into the idea of making a hypothesis in the scientific method. So in the scientific method, you set a hypothesis of what do you think is going to happen? Then you observe that and basically document what is really happening. And finally, you reflect on that data and determine, did we actually meet our hypothesis? Can we confirm that hypothesis, or can we refute that hypothesis? And so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to give you an opportunity to practice crafting a hypothesis statement when you think about new initiatives. So our hypothesis statement framework really goes into this. There are two parts to it. The first part is really the hypothesis. We believe that if we make this change, then we will achieve this particular outcome. And so in the part where it says make this change, we're going to insert the name of the change that needs to happen. And in the outcome, we're going to insert what will be different as a result of this change. So this is kind of similar to how you might be thinking about SMART goals, but a little bit different. So here's an example. So we at a school who are implementing Project GLAD strategies, which are great for English learners, believe that if we use Project GLAD strategies to teach concept knowledge and content knowledge, then we will achieve improved performance in reading, writing, science, and social studies for all learners. That's our outcome. And so what we would like you to do right now is, if you turn to page 4 in your participant activity guide, and you may recall that you can access the participant activity guide by scrolling below the video and the slide deck. You'll see some all caps text that says access participant activity guide. And so what you'll do is you're going to access that guide, and you'll look at that first part that looks very similar to what we see on the screen here. And we'd like you to take a moment to complete this first part. What do you believe, if you make X change, then you as a school, as a district, will achieve X outcome? So let me just show you a little bit of what that looks like in the participant activity guide itself. So the page looks like this. You're just going to do that top portion. You're going to develop your own hypothesis statement. Pages 2 and 3 actually have the same example that I just gave in the slide deck. So that will be great support for you. And then we'll give you an opportunity to, once you have your hypothesis statement, go ahead and type that in the chat. That will give us an idea of when we're ready to move on to the next item. I like your beginning, Charlotte. I'm excited to see what the outcome is going to be. Love it, Kim. We believe if we design interdisciplinary units of study, then we will achieve higher student academic achievement results and higher student engagement in class. Yes, the engagement. I loved doing interdisciplinary units in middle school. Thank you, Alana. If we cultivate a growth mindset among our students, celebrate the way we learn from mistakes, and shift student perception of what it means to be good at math from speed and getting right answers to deep thinking, I can't wait to see what the outcome is going to be with that. These are great. Thanks, Nicole. Thank you, Heather. Oh, I really like this one, Heather, just because it speaks to me. I used to work for an assessment company, so I believe if we have frequent data review meetings after CUIs and CFAs, then we will achieve stronger Tier 1 instruction that will achieve academic achievement growth. Nice. So now let's go to the second part of your hypothesis statement. Yep. All right, so the second part of the hypothesis statement is, how are we going to know if this is true or not? How can we confirm or refute our hypothesis? And when we're thinking about that, we need to consider quantitative data, qualitative data, and performance indicator changes. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see some examples of data that you can use to confirm a hypothesis. We've got quantitative data, which is going to be numeric based. You've got your assessment data, number of office referrals, number of students receiving Tier 2 or Tier 3 supports, student absences, etc. I'm sure you could come up with a number of items there. Qualitative data is going to be more anecdotal, narrative in nature. So student work is a great one to examine for that. Any anecdotal notes, observations. So when you go into the classroom, what do you see if you're a leader? If you're teaching students, what do you actually see the students doing? It could be interviews with the student, interviews with the staff, interviews with community members, etc. And in terms of performance indicator changes, we want to be thinking about knowledge, understanding, application, and creation. So what does the evidence show related to our desired outcome? And what are the next steps we can use to tweak the strategy to continue to gain, to make growth towards that outcome? Sometimes you'll hear performance indicator changes referred to as KPIs or key performance indicators as well. So here's an example, same with that Be Glad. If we use Be Glad strategies, we're going to increase achievement in all academic areas. And so we might know that is true if there is a 20% decrease in the number of students needing Tier 2 or Tier 3 levels of support in reading, writing, science, and social studies. So that's our quantitative. When teachers report higher levels of teamwork among learners, and when students are engaged in productive and receptive language tasks that require the use of grade level content knowledge. So these are all, we've got our quantitative, our qualitative, and our performance indicator change. So now it's your turn. You are going to take a look at that same page, page 4 in your participant activity guide. And you're going to do the bottom portion now. Remember, you can use pages 2 and 3 for support. And then when you've got your examples that explain your data, you can go ahead and type those into the chat as well. We look forward to seeing those.
Hey, Jessica, there should be an example in your participant guide, the very same one.
Sandra, I really hope we can save the chat somehow, because these are great examples.
I know, I thought I want to keep these.
Yeah. You guys are all doing great work.
Yeah. And I hope you see how you can just take this and you have something that you can turn around, on your campus.
Mhm. Great, Lisa. Thank you.
Lisa, you got a lot done there in very little time, like that whole hypothesis and your data. So great job.
Yeah. We'll wait for a few more responses and then we'll move. Great with the outcomes, Kim. That'll be great data to know whether you can confirm or refute your hypothesis. I'm seeing that from a lot of people too. Some really good pieces of data. Yeah, make sure you take some time to read through everyone's responses. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up. We don't have much time left together. We know this was fast, short and sweet. So I just want you to think about this quote as well. It doesn't come from anywhere specific, but I know that I've heard this over the years, and perhaps you have heard something similar too. A system that produces the same outcome over 3 years has demonstrated that it's designed to get those outcomes, whether they are good or bad. So if we set up to improve EL outcomes with X strategy, and across 3 years, we're getting really great outcomes, then we designed it well. But if we're getting really poor outcomes, then we had a poor design and a poor implementation. So it's really important to be looking at your hypothesis statements and constantly coming back to review that data and making adjustments as needed. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A section, because I know that we will have access to that Q&A section after the fact. And so we will make sure to reach out to you with a response, because we are right on time with getting you out to your next session. So please put those in the Q&A section. On that slide before, Sandra had posted, and you'll see that in the slide deck as well, our podcast link, our website link, and several other social links as well. We thank you for coming. And Sandra, do you want to take that last slide away?
I will. Before you leave, I want to make sure you know that you're going to have access to all these materials on demand, including recordings, slide decks, and the participant activity guides. We want to make sure that these materials are just available to our pre-conference registrants. So they're going to be emailed to you early next week. They'll be sent to the email you used to register. And so just appreciate your patience as we get those sent out to you. Also note that the way you access these pre-conference materials is going to be different than the way you access the main recordings and the slides for tomorrow and Thursday. Those are going to be in the event platform in the replay area. So email materials will come to you for those registered. And if you have any questions, like Lisa said, put them in the Q&A tab or email them to summit@branchingminds.com. Thank you for joining our session today and enjoy the rest of the conference and the summit.